Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bear Down Ballers here on the field of 68. I'm Ryan Wall, joined by Jordan Pollock as always. And Jordan, for the second straight season, the Arizona Wildcats are in the Sweet 16. And for the first time since 2014-15, they've made the Sweet 16 in two straight years. Tommy Lloyd, third Sweet 16 in his 4 seasons in Tucson. Just unbelievable stuff. Arizona beat the Oregon Ducks in a Pac-12 matchup from the past. Arizona won 87-83. Caleb Love was the star of the night. 29 points, 9 boards, 5 3-pointers. He was just unbelievable in this one. How are you doing today? And what do you think about the Cats going back to the Sweet 16?
I'm doing well, man. It's a victory Monday, but also it's the first day in 4 days where there's no basketball starting at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. So it's definitely a change of pace. I'm doing great. A little sad the first two rounds are over. I think this is probably one of the first weekends where I've fully devoted almost the entire weekend to that. And I just had such a blast watching all the ball and watching this Arizona team that's just kind of I think surpassed a lot of our expectations already, and I think we've put them at the level where we think they should at least make the Sweet 16. But I think in the way they've done it, I think is just even more impressive than I think what our expectations were.
Yeah, the first weekend of the March Madness tournament is always the best. Wall to wall action, 12 plus hours of games. It's just there's nothing like in all of sports. And Arizona, as you mentioned, they are succeeding our previous expectations. And by getting to the Sweet 16, you want to get there, but you don't want to just get there. You want to get further every year. So we'll get into their matchup against the Duke Blue Devils, the number 1 seed in the East region. They're playing Duke in the Sweet 16 at 9:40 p.m. Eastern Time in Newark, New Jersey this Thursday night. We'll get into that later. But getting into their win against Oregon, we got to start with Caleb Love. As I mentioned, he was the star of the night. And it seemed like every time this game got a little bit closer, Caleb Love was the guy to make a layup, to make a mid-range shot, to make a big three-point shot. Every moment that was asked of him, he stepped up to the moment and just hit it out of the park. What'd you think about Love in this one?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think so much of this year, I think Tommy Lloyd has especially been very much hounding the point of Caleb Love is the face of our program. We run when Caleb Love runs. And with his inconsistency, I think it's always been really easy to look at that and kind of question a lot of that narrative. But I think this game was those things that Tommy has said being proved possession by possession. And like you said, when they needed a bucket, it was Caleb Love either getting a fast break going. It was him hitting a clutch shot. It was him locking down on the defensive end. And I would easily say this is probably his best game that he's had at Arizona. And I think a lot of it probably has to do with the spotlight that was on this game. And like you said, a rematch of the Pac-12, which I kind of wish the announcers would have kind of dove in a little bit more into that. But social media, I think, was giving it a lot of flowers and honoring Bill Walton a lot. I loved seeing how much people were talking about him and just the legendary Pac-12 Conference of Champions matchup that we got. And I really thought this was going to be a lot tougher matchup, and it really looks that way the first 10 minutes. But once Arizona got settled and Caleb got settled, the finish speaks for itself.
Yeah, 100%. I texted you during this game. I thought a lot about Bill Wall, and he would have just had a field day with a game like that between two of his favorite programs to watch. And Jordan, Arizona, although they ended up winning this game, it was not an easy one by any stretch of the imagination. They were down by 15 points in the first half, and it was Arizona's largest comeback in an NCAA tournament game in their program history. And it also was the second largest comeback in the round of 32 history in March Madness. So some pretty historic stuff for the Wildcats. They proved that they are gritty, they are tough, they can come back. And as you said, I 100% agree without a doubt. That was Caleb Love's best game as an Arizona Wildcat. It was his signature game. When Caleb Love came to Tucson 2 years ago, everybody, all they talked about was Carolina Caleb and, the highest the highs, the lowest the lows. But people always and still remember his iconic moment versus Duke in the Final Four and when he hit that big shot and just had a tremendous performance. And this was the first game where, to me, we got the best version of Carolina Caleb, and even more because this version of Caleb Love got 9 rebounds, had 4 assists, was efficient, 10 for 18 from the field, 5 for 7 from three. This was just an all-out incredible performance from Caleb Love. Enough good things can't be said, and as much slack as he has gotten over the course of his 5 year college basketball career, he deserves all the praise and more because we talked about it. Arizona didn't need a 29-point performance from Caleb Love against Akron, but they needed it last night on Sunday night against Oregon. They needed the vintage version of Caleb Love, and they got it. He's a big-time player, and when he's playing at that level, he's one of the best players in the country. There's not many players that are capable of putting up a game like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think him and Bradley, I think, were one of the bigger, I think, pieces of this game. And I talked about specifically how ramped up defensively and how much ball possession Oregon gave Arizona. And over the last month, Arizona has had a really hard time dealing with that. We talked about the Houston matchups they've had and the Iowa State game when they were in Ames, how many turnovers they committed, not being able to get the ball into the post and get their offense going because of how much they stretch the offense out towards the sideline and towards center court, and that's where it's a lot more feasible to get defensive turnovers. And I thought they once they got settled into the game and they're being a lot more strong with the ball, I think those two guards I think led the way of completely changing, I think, the dynamic of the game from the first 10 minutes of the first half to the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, Arizona, 5 of their 8 players in their rotation in this game scored in double figures. And to me, 4 players did score 12 points, coincidentally. KJ Lewis, Jaden Bradley, Anthony Del Orso, and Toby Awaka. But the last guy I just mentioned, to me, he was without a doubt the second best player for Arizona in this game. Toby Awaka, although he only played 22 minutes, he was in foul trouble for most of this game. He had 4 fouls. But 12 points, 14 rebounds, a block and assist, 6 for 8 from the field. This guy was just an absolute beast. I believe he had over 10 rebounds in just the first half. He was that good. And he just plays so much bigger than his size. He's only about 6'8", but he was when he was guarding Nate Biddle, Oregon center. Biddle could barely get anything down low, and Oregon barely even wanted to get Biddle the ball because how well Toby Awaka was playing him. He's such a physical player, and he really just gets in the head of offensive players. So I thought he was just tremendous in this one. What do you think about Awaka?
Yeah, I completely agree, and that was a matchup that I was a little nervous about going into this game. But I think Awaka's ability to almost completely match him in points and rebounds, like they both had double doubles, but Awaka having a whole extra 3 extra rebounds, I think it is a great scenario when one of your role play starter players is able to wash one of the other players or one of the other team's starting star players pretty much, and that's a huge recipe to win.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was, I felt a little bad because I think there were a few calls that I know there was one in the second half, I think around the 9 minute mark, where Biddle slipped and they just called a foul on Vasar just because that I don't know exactly what they saw, but I think there were some calls that I think really were challenging to specifically Vasar. I thought Vasar had a tougher time, and Owaka was a big guy that stepped up. But 8 fouls between those guys against Biddle was it was getting a lot more nerve wracking towards the end of the game, especially when it was getting into the clutch time and they were only down a possession and they just would dump it down to Biddle.
Yeah, I told you during this game that I agree with that. I think the officiating this game was really poor, and I don't remember commenting negatively towards the officiating recently, but it was pretty bad for Arizona in this one. It just seemed like any time Awaka and Vasar, especially in that first half early on, would even just get near and just be physical with Biddle, they would call a foul. And, as we know, you can call a foul on anything at this point in this sport, almost on every possession. But at the end of this game, when it got in the crunch time, it was really the battle between two of the best guards in the country. Jackson Shelstad had 25 points, 9 for 14 from the field. He also had three three-pointers. He was excellent for Oregon, but he just didn't, in the end, he just didn't have enough, and Oregon just didn't have enough stops in their bag to beat Arizona. And somebody I want to talk about because he has got a lot of slack this year, and we've been fair about him. It's just flat out Anthony Del Orso hasn't been a consistent, valuable piece to this Arizona team for multiple games on end this season. But this game, 12 points, 3 rebounds, while only playing 10 minutes, he really proved, or he played 18 minutes and he had two three-pointers. He really proved his worth. He proved that when he is aggressive, he can do more than just score the ball. He can play make for others. And although defense, I think, still a major question mark for him, he made two of the biggest or four of the biggest free throws down the stretch. Tommy Lloyd did a fantastic job of subbing Anthony Del Orso and Awaka in and out on offense and defense, as Del Orso is almost a 90% free throw shooter. I was so nervous when he went in for the 2 of 4 free throws towards the end of that game, because he didn't play for almost an hour. It seemed like 30 minutes, an hour of real time when he was going to the line. What'd you think about that end game situation there?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things that I think Tommy at times has caught slack for, I think, as a coach is his in-game coaching. We know he can recruit and roster build to a degree that's needed for this level and in the offensive style that he changed up, but it was the in-game coaching. And I think especially against Dana Altman, a guy that's been at Oregon for 15 years and has made the tournament pretty much every year but 3 of them, has never lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I think being able to match up super well, I think in game, in crunch time coaching like that, I thought was a huge thing that I've seen that I haven't really seen from Tommy Lloyd. So I completely agree with you. And again, Anthony Del Orso, his role with this team has been so weird because he's a starter, but it's also like if he's not going like super early, if he's not hitting shots, you kind of just got to put him on the bench and let him sit there because of his lack of productability on the other end. But
Yep.
he played his role amazing in this game. He's expected to be an offensive player, and they put him in crunch time to catch the ball, be strong with it, get fouled, and go make free throws. And just the ice in his veins. Like I was sitting on the couch and just like, wow, like the guts that it takes to just come off the bench. And you said yourself, you thought maybe it was an hour between the time that he stepped on the floor in the last minutes between him actually getting in the game and to just step off the bench and make clutch free throws like that was absolutely huge for this team. 4 of 4 in crunch time. I think that was huge, and I think that was the thing that really sold them the win in this game.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And as much of a team performance as their win versus Akron was, this performance was a complete team victory. Everybody contributed. Arizona out rebounded Oregon 44 to 37, and Arizona only had 9 turnovers in this game. But actually, about 3 to 4 at least of those turnovers were just silly mistakes in that first half, and they really could have had like a 5 turnover game, which is very rare for Arizona. But I think they can get to that if they're just clean up a few areas. And they did shoot at 45% and from the field, 50% from three, but also they can improve from the field, as they also missed a lot of, it seemed like, gimme layups in that game that they can improve upon. So although they did beat Oregon by 4 points, there is still room to grow. And as Tommy Lloyd Jordan put it perfectly after the game, he said, so what, now what? And the now is a game and a matchup against the Duke Blue Devils in Newark, New Jersey this Thursday night. And we're going to get into all of that and more when we're back right here on Bear Down Ballers. All right, we're back here on Bear Down Ballers. I'm Ryan Walk, joined by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, Arizona, as we've said, moves on to the Sweet 16 this Thursday night, 9:39 p.m. Against the number one seed in the East region, the Duke Blue Devils, who just beat Baylor by 23 points after Baylor was playing very well and competitive with Duke in the first half. It got out of hand in the second half. Tyrese Proctor, I mean, that guy, he's had 19 in two of the last three and 25 against Baylor. Made 7 3-pointers, his most ever in college. 6+ threes in the last 3 games for Proctor. He's been an X factor for him. Cooper Flag 18 9 and 6 against Baylor, and Arizona in this matchup is a 9.5 point underdog. It opened out Arizona plus 8.5. It's moved in Duke's favor, surprisingly. To me, right off the bat, Jordan, it's just too many points that Arizona is the underdog by. What do you first think of this matchup and how Duke's playing right now?
I think Duke is right now the favorite to win the entire tournament, and I think that's especially with how quickly Cooper Flag has come back and how good he's looked. He still looks like arguably the best player in the entire country, and kind of what they have around him. With Nipple playing how he is, with Proctor playing how he is, there's just not really a ton of weaknesses I really see in this team, and I think that's why I would put them as the favorite right now.
Yeah, I still like they were my pick before the tournament and they've dominated as well. I still have Houston. Uh, I think they're the best team and I think they don't get talked enough about. They've been great and Duke's been amazing too. Arizona and Duke, this is obviously their second matchup this season. Third matchup in the last 2 seasons. Arizona beat Duke last year in Cameron Indoor. Duke won 69-55 earlier this season, the first few weeks. They beat Arizona by 14 points in Tucson. What do you what did you see in that game and do you think anything's changed? Because to me a lot has changed with the way Arizona's been playing and what because against Duke the first game this season they shot it so poorly, under 40% from three or under 40% from the field, 26 from three, and they just really couldn't get going. And Duke's defense really shut Arizona down.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest difference that I see from then to now is I think one of the biggest strengths for Arizona is rebounding, specifically offensive rebounds. And in that first matchup, that was a battle that they lost pretty handedly. They were out rebounded 43 to 30 from Duke, and Duke had 13 offensive rebounds, and that's a stat usually that Arizona has been winning in a majority of their games, and that's something that I think really helps this team get going. It's a demoralizing thing for one thing on the defensive end for the other team, but also it gives you opportunities for second chance points. And even the other day when Duke played Baylor, Norchad Omier, who we've seen a lot, he had 6 offensive rebounds in that game, nine rebounds total. And I know he's a rebounding freak, but we also got some rebounding freaks in Tobe Awaka, Henry Vasar, and even I think Carter Bryant has had some really big bright spots in that
And
department
even
lately.
Caleb Love had almost 10.
Yeah, which is insane, but I think that's a huge thing that I really take away going into the new matchup, especially when our two biggest rebounders, Toby Waka, Henry Vasar, they combined for 25 minutes in that first matchup, combined for 2 points and 15 rebounds total, to where now almost those guys are getting close to averaging more points than that and averaging almost the amount of rebounds separately. So I think that's a huge element that's definitely going to be different going into this rematch.
Yeah, as much as everyone likes to talk about likes to talk about Duke's offense, their defense has been a big factor. Obviously, they held Arizona under 60. They held Baylor to 66, and when you combine a great defensive performance along with hold or when you have Cooper Flagg who had almost 20 and you have Proctor at 25 against Baylor, that's a great recipe. And I said Tyrese Proctor, he is the X factor because he only averaged 12 points this season. And when he's scoring, if he's scoring, 18 to 25, that really just elevates the level because you know what you're going to get from Cooper Flagg. You're going to get 18 to 25 every night from him, no matter what. He scored 24 against Arizona with 7 rebounds. So you know what you're going to get for him. You know, Con Knippel's normally around that, 12 to 14 point range. So it's really who else is going to step up for them. And Tyree Proctor has really stepped up and has really been that guy. And I just don't think what they have been shooting it is I don't think it's going to be able to be consistent moving forward because Duke was only a 30, they were 37% 3-point shooting team this season, which is good, but they shot at 54% from three against Baylor, which is just almost 20% more. So they're likely not going to keep that up. And if Tyrese Proctor's not hitting 6 to 7 threes, will they be able to score 80 points? I don't know. But the other thing, on the other hand, is will Arizona be able to score 80 points? Because against Duke the first time this season, they really struggled. I mean, in that game, Caleb Love only had 8 points, 3 for 13 from shooting. Jaden Bradley led the way with 18. He was 50% from the field. He was the only kind of plus guy on offense for Arizona, and everyone else just couldn't get anything on offense for themselves. So I just Arizona started the season so poorly, and I just think this team has just changed so much since then. I don't even think you can take that much away from Arizona in that game, and maybe even Duke because they've grown too. But I just think Arizona has maybe gotten better since then. And I just, as I said, I do not think that Duke is not almost a 10-point better team than Arizona. I think Arizona thing I'm most confident about is Arizona covering that spread of 9.5 points. But I think Arizona has a real shot to win this game. I think these teams match up very well. And I think the guy, as well as he played on defense against Oregon, if Toby Awaka could stay out of foul trouble, I want to see Toby Awaka matched up with Cooper Flagg on the post. I want to see Toby Awaka be physical and test Cooper Flagg when he catches the ball in the catch and see if Arizona could have some success there, along with guys guarding Flagg like Carter Bryant and maybe KJ Lewis, a smaller guy. What do you think about this matchup this time around?
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points, and I think one of them specifically goes to I think Arizona and scoring, and then they're going to show up and how Duke's going to play them defensively. Duke is a good defensive team, but also Arizona in the games where they don't consistently show up to play offense, they lose those games. In their 4 games this year where they've scored under 60, they've lost every single one of those games. 58 when they played Houston at home, 55 like you said at Duke, and then 54 at Texas Tech, and 54 when they played UCLA and Phoenix. So that I think that's a big thing, especially in the first matchup. Caleb Love went 3 of 13 with only 8 points. When your best player is putting those kinds of stats, and I think at that point, I don't even think I would have considered Duke a great defensive team at that point. And a lot of that, like you said, could have just been Arizona not fully understanding their roles. Um, so there's a lot different, and you got to think the big minutes that were in the first matchup were all Krivas. Krivas was the starter. Krivas was on the floor a majority of that first Duke game, and so without him, we've seen a huge drastic increase in how the front court has played throughout this season, and I think that's going to be a huge thing going into this game, especially like I said, when you look at the rebounding department. And I also want to bring up an interesting storyline. The first ever back-to-back losses that Tommy Lloyd had was to this Duke team back in November when they're coming off a loss in Madison. And so I think that's a big thing. I do think they match up a little bit better than they did earlier in the season. I agree with you. I do think that Arizona will cover the spread. I think 10 is a little high, especially with how Arizona's been playing. Um, but I think a majority of the bettors are looking at Cooper Flagg and how much this Duke team is rolling. And a month ago, I was very low on this Duke team, and Tyrese Proctor is the deciding factor for me. When I looked at this team and it was just led by Cooper Flagg and Con Knippel, I'm like 2 freshmen. I'm scared by that. I don't love that having to win 4 to 5 games in a row, led by freshmen that it's their first time ever doing this. It's first time ever playing basketball, probably into March with the same team. Most high schools get done in February, and so a guy that's done it, that's in the mix, that's helping lead the team, I think is the difference maker with this Duke team. And I think Duke's going to win this game. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be within 2 possessions, but I do think Duke will win this game.
Yeah, some nuggets before we go here. Arizona leads the all-time series against Duke 6-5. Caleb Love obviously is a major storyline against Duke going into this game. He leads Duke 5-4 when playing Duke at North Carolina and playing them multiple times now at Arizona. So Caleb Love, obviously the most familiar on this team with Duke. They're familiar with him. It really is just Hollywood writers can't write a better script than this. Arizona versus Duke again. Caleb Love potentially his last game being against Duke, maybe sending Duke home. Arizona's won 3 of the last 4 against Duke, and the last time these teams played in March Madness was in 2011 in Anaheim, California. Arizona was a 9.5 point underdog in that game, like they are in this game, and Arizona won 93-77 in that one. So Arizona has had a lot of success against Duke. Although Duke is a more dominant program and they're the number 1 seed this year, it's different. But I think Arizona, as I mentioned, I think this is close to 50-50, although I still think Duke has put out better performances and has beat down teams better, but also I don't think Duke's played teams like Arizona has. I don't think playing Baylor, although I like Baylor isn't as good as Oregon. And even their first round matchup, Mount St. Mary's, isn't as good as Akron. So, and they earned that by being a number 1 seed. But Arizona is, to me, the more, I think, battle ready team at this moment because I don't think Duke, since last week in the ACC tournament, they weren't, against a major or just the top, whatever, 25 team-ish team. So I think Arizona has played the tougher competition. I love how Arizona's playing. And although in my bracket, I have Duke beating Arizona, as we discussed before the tournament started, I'm going to change it for this show right here. Everything changes as we know at Arizona. Each game, I think Arizona is going to win this game. I think they have been playing better team basketball. And by team basketball, I mean 8 guys playing for Arizona and each one of them contributing. Duke's bench is a weakness of their team. And like I said, if Tyrese Proctor isn't Steph Curry, I don't think Duke beats Arizona. I really don't. I think this Arizona team is just really playing at such a high level right now. So you got Duke, I got Arizona. Any final thoughts before we go, Jordan?
Yeah, I think your point about I think the competition that Duke has played, like I probably before they played Baylor yesterday, probably the last time they played a top 25 team, I think was in December. So as being the only ACC team left, I think they're one of 3 that even made the tournament, and that was just because North Carolina got in the first 4. The ACC was probably one of his most all-time worst seasons it's ever had, and their competition has not been great. And so I think Arizona is going to have to force them into different kinds of ways that they've had to win, basically. And I think that's probably the best way that Arizona has a chance to win is the defensive intensity, making Duke try to win in different ways that they haven't before, and Arizona showing up on the boards and scoring the ball efficiently.
100%. I can't wait for this matchup. It's number 1 seed Duke versus number 3 Arizona or 4 Arizona in the Sweet 16 in Newark, New Jersey, the Prudential Center. 9:39 tip-off Thursday night. It's Tommy Lloyd versus John Shire. It's Caleb Love's last time against Duke. Will he deliver another iconic moment? We'll have to wait and see Thursday night, but that's all we have time for today. I'm Ryan Wall. He's Jordan Pollock, and we'll